the help of Hashem, we are learning Megila Daf Chav Zayin. We left off on Daf Chav of Amid Beis. We are 4 lines into the wide lines. We are continuing to learn the sugya, comparing Tashmishay Mitzvah versus Tashmishay Kadusha. We're going to learn a very important detail, which is that objects that only safeguard Kadusha, scripture, are not in the halachic category of Tashmishay Kadusha. Objects that can be safeguarding, but also, that's the key, add to the dignity, like think about the Aron HaKodesh. It's not just to safeguard it adds to the dignity. Your tefillin bag adds to the dignity. Since it adds to the dignity, that's why it's in the category of Tashmishay Kedusha, and that's a very important nuance and detail that we should bear in mind. When we spoke yesterday that there is a Machlokes Rishonim, which there is, Rabbeinu Ephraim, Rabbeinu Yoina, and many others, and this goes all the way down into the Poskim, as to the question whether you can use money that came from something of a level of Kedusha to something else of the equal level. It's really based on a Gemara that we're going to learn today on Daf Chav Zayin. So we're going to see this discussion in the Gemara, and as you'll see, it's not clear what the conclusion is, which is how ultimately it became this very Machlokes Rishonim. The case that the Gemara will mention is Dafka, a Sefer Torah, which is on the highest level of Kedusha. And the question is whether you can sell one Sefer Torah to buy another. And there's a nuance regarding Dafka, the Sefer Torah, that you don't have an option there of Mailan B'Kodesh, because as we learned in the Mishnah, the item that has the highest level of Kedusha is indeed a Sefer Torah. Another very important detail that we will learn today. Our Mishnah was speaking about a sale that happened. And then the money has to be used to purchase something of a higher level of Kedusha. What happens if it's not about a sale? That's going to be today in the Gemara. A fundraiser, great example. A Sefer Torah. You fundraised for a Sefer Torah, and you bought a Sefer Torah, but there was leftover money. So the Mishnah said the Moisrei Sayim, the leftover money from a sale, has to be used just like the money proper. What will be regarding, and there might be a difference, because when you fundraised, people knew from the outset, it's not a science. Like sometimes you'll find a deal, and people did not expect to get their money back. Now the remaining money, as we'll see, has to be used for communal needs, but it doesn't even have to be a communal need that has any Kedusha involved in it. It can be completely a secular, mundane, a road, a bridge. That's also, you fundraised for a Sefer Torah. We bought a Sefer Torah. That's going to be another very important detail that we're going to have today. Actually, we're going to learn that it used to be that tzedakah collectors had a lot of power, not legal power, but there was a lot of communal power. And to a certain degree, every community has their own way of giving tzedakah. I know many people here feel pressured over Yantav to give tzedakah, but it used to be that they would tell you, the gaboy tzedakah, that there is a need for the poor and you have to participate with X amount of money. And we're going to learn about a visitor to a location. And if he was being solicited with such a demand, there are times that he should give the money, and before he goes back home, he gets that money refunded, not for his pocket, but for the aniyim of his city. Phenomenal concept. On Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis, we're going to learn the other side of the coin to the first Mishnah in this Perek. What's the other side of the coin? Our Mishnah was focusing primarily, what do you do with the money? So you sold the ark, now with the money you buy something with Mailam HaKodesh. You sold the shul, what do you do with the money? On the Chav Zayin Amid Beis, we're going to speak about what do you do with the old shul? What happened to the old shul? Now I know we mentioned it, but we're going to have more nuance. Like, is it still holy? Is it not holy? We're going to have various opinions in Tanoim how to approach it. This is a very practical question, because there are times that a shul is sold, and what stipulation must they make? What must the buyer know? Is the buyer bound? Is the buyer indeed limited? And if the seller finds out later, oh my God, the buyer made a schwitz over there, this is going to be the topic of the Mishnayos and the Sugis we're going to learn on Chav Zayin Amid Beis, and a lot more. We're going to touch a little bit on Ribis B'tzad Echad, but let's get moving. Okay, excuse me. So Nachum, we left off on Daf Chav Amid Beis. We are 4 lines into the Gemara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol nevadorim. There's nothing better for your throat than coffee. It's mamish, amazing. It hydrates. We learned that. So we learned the 4th line going down. Oh, I want to say something that right after we finished the class, maybe it was still on the Zoom, Danny pointed out that when it says that if you have an ark that fell apart, that you can make with it another ark, so Danny says, that's a right to the Rabbeinu Yoina, lav davkem. The Rabbeinu Ephraim says that something of equal is not okay. It has to go up. Rabbeinu Yoina says it just may not go down. Using broken parts of an ark to build a new ark is not exactly our topic. Our topic was you made a sale. Now you have money. Here we're speaking about the ark proper. You have the pieces of wood. So it broke, some of it got ruined. You can't make the ark of the same size, so make a smaller ark. That, according to everyone, is okay, because it's the same ark. It's like you refurbished the ark. Okay. However, like we said, but to make a shtender out of it is prohibited. That was the last statement we learned, even though the shtender sometimes was also used to have on it a Sefer Torah, but a shtender only has on it a Sefer Torah very rarely, only on occasion. The Aron HaKodesh, the ark, has on it a Sefer Torah constantly. That's considered an item of higher Kadusha, and that's called moiridin if you will use the wood to make a shtender. Weiter, next, ve'amar Rava. Hai perisa devala. If you have a curtain of the Aron Kodesh that got worn out, what should you do with it? So leme'evdei perisa lesifri, make a mantle for a Sefer Torah. And you know what? Mailan ba'kodesh, think about it. Because the curtain on the ark, I know it's servicing and adding dignity to the Sefer Torah, but it's far away from the Sefer Torah. It's removed from the Sefer Torah. Keminig Ashkenazim, there's not a wooden, beautiful door in between the curtain and the Sefer Torah. Making it into a mantle, having this material go directly on the Sefer Torah is an upgrade. However, if you are only going to use it for a mantle, lichumashin, guys, they used to have one of the 5 books of Moshe in its own Sefer, before books. They would have a scroll just of Bereshis. It doesn't have the Kadusha of a Sefer Torah, but it has Kadusha. But still, says Rava, that if you're going to take the worn out curtain, that may not be used to make a mantle to a Chumash. That's called Moiridin, because even though when the curtain is on the Aron Kodesh, it's not directly on the Sefer, but you know what? It's servicing a Sefer Torah. Here you are putting it only on the Chumash, closer to, on the other hand, lesser. That's called Merid, and it's prohibited. Ve'amar Rav, another rule. Hani zevili de chumshi. They used to have certain sacks, certain material in which they would store these single chumashim. Or the komatre de sifri, cases, this is like the Sephardic cases, in which we had a Sefer Torah. Both of them are tashmishe kedusha. They are considered accessories of kedusha, and therefore, like we learned the rule, they may never be discarded. They always have to be nignaz. They have to be put away, which means they have to be buried. In fact, the Gemara, who needs that statement from Rava? Of course. No, it's not of course. Mao the tema hanu lavlo chavadavidi. This type of zivile, these types of sacks, that type of case, I take back what I said, the Sephardic case. The Sephardic case is beautiful. There were certain cases that primarily were made only liniture, to provide protection. And this is a very important klal, guys. We said this in the intro yesterday, we repeated it today, now we have a third time. An item that is a accessory for davar shebekadusha, but it's only for its protection, doesn't become imbued with the status of tashmishe kedusha. It has to be there. It doesn't matter if it's also there for protection, but there has to be a certain amount of beautification aspect or a dignity aspect, like a tefillin bag. Of course, it's protecting it from the rain, but it's beautiful. That's why it's tashmisha kedusha. So you might have thought that these things are primarily there only linatura ba'al mavidi. They're made only for protection. So Komash Malan, that no, it's not only for protection, they also add to the dignity. The fact, no, that's that with the picture that came in us pudding, that's for sure an item that's for the dignity. Mistama, there were certain boxes, or like, let me ask you a question. When they transport now scrolls, with all the details that it's not kosher yet, sometimes they can put it in a wooden box, just an example. Does that wooden box become Tashmisha Kedusha? No, because if it was only there to protect it, that it shouldn't get beaten up, it shouldn't get wet, or that's not called tashmishi. That's the key here. It has to be also to add epis to its dignity. Weiter. There was a shul. The Yehudoi Ruma, there were Romans that built a shul over there in Bavel. Interesting. Here again, like we had yesterday, it was common that people of the same social circles or from the same city, they would build their own shuls. Pornage, Spanish, right? The Portuguese, Spanish shul. You have all these things. And the Have, Pasiach, the Rebbe wanted this so much in Kfar Chabad, the Nachlas Kfar Chabad, correct? That the Bukharim should have their own shul. It's important. They come from the same social circle. They have their own minhagim. Anyways, the Hava Pasiach Lahu Id Roino, the Hava Machis Leimeis. The shul was built in a way that there was a Cheder Sheni. The side room, the second room, didn't have a door that separated it from the main room. And you know what that side room was used for when needed? As a morgue. Many times people make levayas in a shul. Now there's a problem, and here we're going a little bit off topic, on topic, that if you have a mace under the same roof, then there's tumas oil. A kohen may not enter in this environment. Even if it's in a side room, if there is an open door, there was no door, there's an opening. It's a second room, but it's open. The truth is, even if there's an opening only in the size of a tefach by a tefach, then the tumah carries into that second environment. So the issue was that there was a mace. And Va'ava boy Kahani Lamei Litzloya Hasam Kahana wanted to daven in the shul at that time. Now, what do you do? So now these are details of Tum and Tara. And the details are that if you were to put as a mechitza, an item that will itself become tamei, that item cannot halachically stop the tumah from going from that little cheder sheni into the shul. Only an item that in itself does not become tamei has the halachic power to affect a chatzitza, an interposition, and will not allow the tumah to go into the main room in the shul. So the question was regarding the Aron Kodesh. Now it's a multifaceted question. Can you move the Aron HaKodesh at that time to cover the door to the morgue, and it would fully cover that opening? The advantage of an Aron HaKodesh is that it's normally a large wooden keli, and we learned that klei eitz, there's a certain size of a piece of furniture that if it's primarily not going to be moved because of its weight, or even if it cannot be moved when it's full, even if it's not heavy enough to be moved, you can move it when it's empty, but when it's full, you can't move it, it becomes like something affixed to the ground, it's not mekabel tumah, and it affects a chatzitza. Now, one thing we will see, that aside of the question whether it indeed does not become tamei, aside of that issue, it's allowed to be used. And I think that's the connection of our sugya. So when we're speaking about giving honor to Tashmisha Kedusha, it doesn't mean that you can't use it for this purpose. You could. The only question is, will it work? So let's read it inside. So also, they told Rava, what should we do? So Amalahu Rava says, I have a good solution. Yeah, you're in a shul. So Dalu, lift up Tevusa, the ark, Oisfuam, and place it in the doorway. And what's the advantage? Because every shul is different, but like our main Aron Kodesh, for sure, it's considered the keli. It's a wooden utensil, even though it's not affixed to the ground, but it's made to be stationary. It's a large piece of furniture, and the rule is, any large wooden keli that it's primarily meant for it to be stationary. Right? It's not built on wheels. And the rule is that if something in itself doesn't become tuma, even if it's in the same environment, then umemela it's choitzes v'pnei tuma. And the chiddush.
What about the horn of the mess itself? Doesn't that make the chatzitza?
No, because the aron is dafka made to move. That's a great example. The aron is made. The aron of the mace, you have to bury a mace. It has to do with the size and the measure that it can hold. And it's certainly, but logically, Shlomo, you have to carry the Aron HaMeis to the Makam HaKvura. The point is that you are allowed to use the Aron HaKodesh. That's the real message here. Now, whether it's correct that the Aron HaKodesh indeed is considered an item that is unmovable, so they challenged. No, there are times that the Aron HaKodesh of that shul that Rava didn't know was not that humongous. And there were times that even when there was a Sefer Torah in it or on top of it, they still moved it. In other words, it was actually that Aron Kodesh at time was used as a bima, just to give you the dimensions. So they would read on top of it. So it wasn't that big. And therefore, it's an item that can be moved not only when it's empty, but the fact that they were able to move this piece of furniture even when there was a Sefer Torah on it, which is tantamount to being in it, that therefore is mekabel tuma. It's not choitzitz. So Ihachi, so Rava says, I didn't know that. If that's the case, lo yafsher, it's not going to work. What's the kesher? The kesher is that if it would have worked as far as Din Tumah are concerned, it's not disrespecting the Aron HaKodesh. In our case, you're moving it for a Kadusha reason. That's the way I see it. It's not a mundane reason. Kohanim want to daven. Now, you're putting it covering a morgue, so what? That's not considered disrespectful. The mace is probably, in Tachrichen or in a Aron. There's no disrespect here. Yes, you're moving it for a second reason. That's fine. Let's go by it. And now, Mamash Hemshech. So now we're going to start learning about using items that have Kedusha because they are Tashmishe Kedusha for other purposes as well. Amar Marzutra, Mitbachais, Svarim, the wrappings of Svarim. The mantles we call Shabalo, they get worn out. It's so common. Go to your Aron Kodesh in your local shul. Many of the mantles, if the Sefer Torah is not used, it's going to be beautiful. It's almost a compliment. You use it a lot. This piece of wood falls off, that the string begins to come out. So oisan tachrich mitzvah. How beautiful. So it's tashmishe kedusha. Now, what did we say? The highest level of kedusha is a Sefer Torah. Where do you go from there? You don't. Especially if you're going to follow the Rabbeinu Ephraim, you can't go up. What are you going to do with it? So you have to bury it. So think about it. If you have to bury it anyways, and we just said right now from Rava that if not for the issue that Aron HaKodesh wasn't big enough, you can use it for something else. Why not make shrouds for the Meis Mitzvah? Someone is unable to afford shrouds. It's so gewaldig. First of all, if we would view a mace as a lower level of a Sefer Torah, we would not be allowed because that would be Moedidin. But since a Jewish body is mamish like a Sefer Torah, not when the Yid is alive, after the Jew passed away, how beautiful is that? Based on what we learned from Rava, you can use it for something else. And I would go even according to the Rabbeinu Ephraim, like we just mentioned, Danny, I don't know if you were here in the beginning, you're not selling it and buying something equal. You're using this itself. So it's wrapped this Sefer Torah. A Jew is also a Sefer Torah. The Baal Shem Tov said every Jew is a letter in the Sefer Torah. This is such a Hasidic concept, this. Wow. Now, how far do you extend it? In other words, can you use a worn out Aron Kodesh wood to make an Aron HaMeis? That's a big discussion amongst the Poskim. And whether it's tantamount to this or not, lav dafka. Because the Aron HaKodesh has a Sefer Torah directly in it. And an Aron, you have talis, and you have tachrichen, you have various items in the casket that interposes the casket from the mace more than the Aron Kodesh. That's the reason of the poskim that say you can't. But the concept of that a Yid has a status of a Sefer Torah, and the item itself, like one Aron, another Aron, a mitbachais can be mitbachais. So mitbachais can be tachrichen. Gewaldig. It was worth it just for this.
So it's specifically a mitzvah, not a private.
Well, okay, Danny's making another point. No, it's used a communal. I think it's a communal obligation. Correct. Very nice. Very good. Shkoyach. Now that also, okay, very good. Okay, l'chaim. V'zuhi ginizasam, and that's the way. It's almost like this is the way. This is the way you are goyness. Goyness again literally means to hide, meaning this is the way you bury it. The Amarava Sefer Torah Shabbalam. What happens if a Sefer Torah came to the point where it's so worn out, it's constantly found invalid? So now, it's not that it's puzzle and you're going to leave it in the Aron HaKodesh until when you fix it. You're going to have to bury it. It should dafka be buried near a Talmud Chacham. Can you use, Rav Moshe wrote a tshuva, there was a Sefer Torah that survived the Holocaust, it was not kosher, and they wanted to know whether they can put it on display. He wrote a tshuva that you could, just saying. No, that's not disrespectful. But if you're going to bury it, I'm just giving examples. We have Sefer Torah that are unfixable, but we don't bury them. We want to have them for a reason. The first synagogue in the Americas, I'm sorry, my North American friends, that's in Brazil. In Recife, there's a Sefer, or Manaus, there's a Sefer Torah that was brought over from Spain, that they say it's 1,000 years old. I saw that Sefer Torah. It's not buried, it's kept in the Aron HaKodesh. I forgot, either in Recife or in Manaus, and they dance with it Simchas Torah. That's beautiful, that's okay. But if you're going to bury it, better even to bury it near a Talmud Chacham, and vafilu shoyna halachas. a Rosh Yeshiva wrote this line. Guys, there's a perpetual machlokes between the Rosh Yeshiva and the Rabbanim. The Rabbanim find the Rosh Yeshivas to be mamash amaratzim. They know 4 daf of Gemara good and they know nothing else. And the Rabbanim say that the Rosh Yeshivas say that the Rabbanim understand nothing. So the Rosh Yeshivas hold that people who only learn halacha, they understand nothing. So even if you're only shayna halacha, is mamash. Even if you don't know how to learn be'iyun, so you know all of the Dalet Chelkei Shulchan Aruch. And the Rosh Yeshiva knows maybe a quarter of one. So what? But Versteht, whatever he knows, he knows. Doesn't matter. Even a Shayna Halach is chashuv enough to be worthy of having the Sefer Torah buried near him. However,
can I ask a really quick question?
Sure.
My daughter is an archivist at the Simon Wiesenthal near you, and she said that she has a drum that someone donated with has Torah parchment used by the Nazis. So, and it has scripture on it. So it's kind of like a parchment Torah scroll, but not the whole scroll. And they have that on display. Is that something that should be buried?
I think, Baruch, again, this is a good question. I'm not qualified, but just in the world of theory, I think it should be on display for us to remember what the Nazis did to us. Not to use it. I don't think there's a disrespect. They were the ones that disrespected it. We are remembering what they did. It's like we didn't bury the hair of or the shoes or certain items because let us remember. But they should ask. I would even argue, Baruch. The question, the tshuva that I just quoted from Rav Moshe is very similar. They wanted to put something on display. Okay, let's go weiter. However, when you bury a Sefer Torah, this is in general, whether it's being buried near a Talmud Chacham, whether it's being buried by itself, the opposite logic of burying a corpse. When we bury a corpse, so if that person was a tzaddik, and there's a certain high level of tzidkis that the body will not decompose, it won't decompose. But the moment we're not on that high tzaddik gadol, the quicker the body decomposes, the better for the soul. We don't do anything that will slow down that process. When it comes to a Sefer Torah that has to be buried, even though it will eventually decompose, it's a mitzvah to do something to slow the process down. And what slows the process down? Putting it in a earthenware utensil, and that's based on a pasuk in Yirmiyahu when he said in Nevi'us regarding they were selling land and the galus was coming, but we also had a munah that there's only going to be a 70-year galus. So what he said is that all of the sales that you make sure you preserve the documents, because even though you're going to be exiled, you're going to come back, and then you make sure everyone knows what land is theirs. It should not be disputed. So he says, put your documents in an earthenware keli, l'man yamdu yamim rabim. That's a proof from Scripture. We don't care about nature. We care about Torah. How do you know that Klei Cheres works? Whether it works or not doesn't matter. The Torah says it works, so therefore it works. Now, Amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava. Based on the premise that definitely ideal, even according to the Rabbeinu Yoina, to go up, David, Beis HaMedrash, Beis HaKnesses. Which one has more Kadusha? Beis HaKnesses means a environment designated exclusively for prayer. Beis HaMedrash is an environment that's designated for both, for davening and learning. So, mibei knishta lebei rabbanon shari, to sell a Beis HaKnesses and use its funds to buy a Beis HaMedrash, that's called Mailan B'Kodesh. That's what Rav Papi says, Rava says. However, the other way around, mibei rabbanon, Beit Rabbanan means a Beis HaMedrash, last line, Lebei Knishta Aser. However, Rav Papa, in the name of Rava, had the opposite version of what Rava said. And Amar Ravacha, Daf Mechav Zayin, Oy Gevaldik, not Gewalt, Kavasid, Rav Papi Mistabra. Why? Because since we know Rabbi Shua ben Levi is the one that says that a Beis HaKnesses itself may be transformed into a Beis HaMedrash, and this is connected to the same topic, Mailam B'Kodesh, Shma Mina, that what? Guys, Rabbi Shua ben Levi was from the early Amoraim, and it's not mistaber that Rava would argue with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So since we know Rabbi Shua ben Levi held that what? That a Beis HaMedrash is greater in Kedusha, that must be the version of Rava. points out Tosfos something amazing for people. We have to go through the Klali Hashas that we're going to see in a few lines that Rabbi Yechanan argued with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And Bachlal, Rabbi Yechanan, the halacha is like Rabbi Yechanan, right? Rabbi Yechanan is shlakish, halacha ki Rabbi Yechanan chutz mitlas. Rabbi Yechanan normally is the final say. Yet it must be that if it's Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. That's the stop Tosfos. And again, therefore, it's logical that Rava would follow the halacha. So that's going to resolve which version, right? Rav Papi or Rav Papa. So therefore, it's like Rav Papi. Darash Marka.
Rabbi, side question over here.
We got to move, yeah.
If you have a family that owns the shul and is selling it to a community, and they have that money, are they allowed to do with that money what they want? Meaning, the shul is being kept as a shul. The family sold it, let's say, back to the community.
So very good. So I'll answer. We're learning this now. Okay, in Svika, we're not paskening, but we mentioned something. I'll repeat it now. We're going to have this later. What we mentioned yesterday from Rava, that there's a big difference whether Paka Kadusha, which is what you're asking, whether the Kadusha goes away, is whether it was done, if it's, Rava says that if it's done by the trustees in the presence, which will be tantamount svika to your case when it's privately owned. That means if all of the stakeholders were part of the sale, Paka Kedusha, most of the Rishonim learn that that's also a machlekes Rab Meir and the Chachamim. Rav Meir disagrees with that, the Chachamim agree with that. So based on what we're learning, svika, according to the Chachamim, right, then since all of the stakeholders were aware of it, then the Kedusha left with the money. Now what happens to the environment? We're going to learn that on Amid Beis. These are very important questions because Maisim B'chol you have no idea how common this is. Let's go weiter. Darash Var Kapara. Ma'idech Siv. Let's go, we're trying to discover what is considered greater, Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaMedrash. So you have a pasuk that says in Melachim, Vayisref is Beis Hashem. This is, foreseeing the Churban. And Beis HaMelech was burnt. And all of the houses in Yerushalayim. And the ace called Beis Gadol, sort of Ba'esh. Now, what does that refer to? So Beis Hashem goes to the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMelech goes to the Platin and Shalmelech, the palaces of the kings. The ace called Bati Yerushalayim, Kimashma'an. That's what happened. Both Churbanis. There was a Churban. And now here's the key. When it says the ace called Beis Gadol, and the big house was burnt in fire, Machlokes, Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the one that we just quoted from Tosfos. Chad Amar, when it says Beis Gadol, the greatest means Beis HaMedrash. And one says, no, Gadol must mean a place designated only for prayer. Man, the Amar Torah, where do we find that Gadol is used regarding to learning Torah? As it says, Chevra, Hashem Chafetz L'man Sitkoi, Yagdil, Torah v'Yadir. Man, the Amar Tfilah, Dechsiv, Sapro no Hagdoilois, Asher Asa Elisha. The great things that Elisha did. Now, Elisha is a Navi. What medium did Elisha use to effect great miracles? Prayer. If Elisha the Avad, Berach Mehu the Avad. Perhaps there were other tzaddikim that did the Gedolos through learning. Anyways, that's Elisha did it through prayer, and that's called Hagdolos. So, Machlokes. Now, who said which one? And the Gemara says, I will prove to you that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is the one that said that Makim Shemegadlon by Torah, quoting from above, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Beis HaKnesses is allowed to be transformed and upgraded into a Beis HaMedrash. Shema Mino, that he says Beis HaMedrash, Rabbi Yechanan says Beis HaKnesses has the highest level of Kadusha. Again, this is a good klal in Klali Hashas. Normally halachic Rabbi Yechanan. But if it's Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, halachic Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Our shul is not even a Beis HaMedrash. Our Chabaros is not even a Beis HaMedrash because lechatchila it's also made for fabrengens. It's also made for social gatherings. It's lechatchila multi-purpose room.
Like the kollel that they learn all day, is that a Beis Medrash?
I would argue that even a kollel, a Litvish kollel, they also lechatchila they would prefer for it not to have the status of a Beis Medrash only.
Do we have Beis Medrash?
They have, I would say, the great synagogue in Yerushalayim on King George is a Beis HaKnesses. I think it's only used for prayer. That's a good example. And David, I would say that, okay, a Hasidic kollel is not a Beis Medrash because it's a given that people are gonna shmooze in a good way. They're gonna fabreng, like I said, not during the times of learning. How you doing? We can make a fabreng and we can eat. It's a multi-purpose.
In Yerushalayim, you're saying it's a Beis Knesses?
The great synagogue is a Beis HaKnesses.
What would be a Beis Medrash?
Maybe Davar, a good Litvish kollel. People that bittul Torah, they sit and learn day and night. Could be. And they don't talk. And they don't talk. They don't tolerate anything other than that.
And they daven somewhere else.
No, they can daven there. No, based on medrash, you can daven. Actually, we learned to some brachas. It's good to daven at the beam that you're learning. People daven in the place of the learning. Based on medrash doesn't exclude davening. It excludes anything else other than davening and learning. Okay, Chavi, we got to move. Says the Mishnah, Avol Machru Tayram. It's mamash. You think about. I just want to repeat this. The first simon in Sefer Yetzirah, it's really if you're going from Malchus to Kesed, and then it goes back down. It goes up. The Mishnah went up from the lowest Kadusha was the Chayva Shalir. There's a ruchnistic thing. It's going from one level higher, and then it reversed and it went down, which is really our avodah. You go Molmata Labayla. A Yid goes, but the reason why we go up is not to go up. We're not spiritual seekers. It's to bring Kadusha back down. So the Seder of Torah is you begin in the low, you go up the ladder, and then you have to bring it back down. So the back down was, but if you sold the Sefer Torah, don't buy Sfarim. Guys, this is the Yisoid of the Rabbeinu Ephraim and Rabbeinu Yaina. So we got ahead of ourselves, which is fine, but this is the Gemara addresses equal here. And you'll see, it's not clear. The Gemara didn't come to a conclusion. The case that the Gemara is discussing about whether you can sell and use the money for equal is by the highest level, selling a Sefer Torah. And there's something unique about selling a Sefer Torah because there is no place higher to go. You have an old Sefer Torah. Well, it's not, you have to know Hilchas Sefer Torah. It's not where the point where in every Sefer and every column there's that many mistakes, so therefore there's nothing you can do. It's still at the place where it's usable, but the people don't like, every now and then you find a letter that's puzzle. And even though for sure, but the Kriya is okay, you don't want to deal with the old Sefer Torah. Can you sell it to buy a new Sefer Torah? You know, it's equal. We're not saying that, we're not saying Kadusha is better. We're saying halachically it has the same Kadusha. Just practically Kadusha is better. So Kivin Deloy Mali Lay, since you're not going up a notch, Sefer Torah, it's Asur, because Mailan Bakoidish is the emphasis. Oidilma, Kivin the Lekala Iluya, there is no way going up. It's when you can go up, it's mashma from here, guys like the Rabbeinu Ephraim, you have to see how it's mashma. If you can go up, go up. If you cannot go up, because from a Sefer Torah there's nothing higher in the Mishnah, then it's okay. So Tashema, we're going to try to prove, and it's not going to go. Our Mishnah says, Avol Machru Torah, Lo Yikchu Sfarim. End of quote. Infers the Gemara. Sfarim Udalei, Sfarim not. Down you can't go. Down you can't go, but equal you could go. We said this when we learned the Mishnah. The reason why it's not a proof is because you can make the opposite inference from the Reisha. The Gemara says no. Masnisin, even better. Maybe our Mishnah is only speaking di'evad, which is very important. Di'evad means if you already sold the Sefer Torah after the fact, what are you going to do with the money? You're going to burn the money? Of course. If I could make the inference, buy another Sefer Torah. Our discussion is whether you can sell something with the knowledge that you're not going up, because you can't. That's the boy. Next, Tashema, it says in a Braisa, you are allowed to wrap Sifrei Torah with wrappings that were previously used for single Chumashim. Again, the Chumash is not your printed Chumash, it's Ksavashuris with the ink on parchment, but only one. So it has a din of a Chumash and it doesn't have a din of a Sefer Torah. So you can use those wrappings, you're going up. The Chumashim, one of the five books. And Chumashim can be wrapped with wrappings that were previously used for Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And you're going up. And then the Braisa says, Avoloi Nevi'im Ksuvim, but you can't go down. You can't use for Nevi'im and Ksuvim wrappers that were previously used for Chumashim, and you can't use for Chumashim mitbachais that were previously used for Sefer Torah. End of quote. Says the Gemara, Katani Mias, let's be medayik. Goyel and Sefer Torah, you are allowed to roll a Sefer Torah with wrappings that were previously used for Chumashim. So let's make an inference. But mitbachais Chumashim in. But what about using wrappings that were previously used for another Sefer Torah? Staying on the same level, loy. Can't keep it on the same level, you have to go up. The Gemara says no, because if that is a correct inference, then I'll have a stira minei ubei, because ema seifa, when it says in the Braisa loy chumashim mitbachai sifrei Torah, I can be medayik. Ha Torah b'Torah shaper dami. Ella, therefore the rule is maha leka lemishma mina. Whenever you have a opposite conclusion by making inferences from the Reisha to the Seifa, from the Seifa to the Reisha, you cannot make any inference at all because you don't know which one is the Ikar, which one is not the Ikar. I know Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote things symmetrical, but it may not be used as a proof. Next, Tashema, we learned in a Braisa, Oi, gewaltig. Manichin Sefer Torah al gabe Sefer Torah. Me'ingen le'ingen bo'isa ingen. Can you put a Sefer Torah on another Sefer Torah? Guys, before the Taz, no one spoke about printed books. I'll quote the Taz in a moment. Now we're speaking about real Sefer Torah. So says the Braisa, yes, you can put a Torah on top of Chumashim. You can put a Chumash on top of Nevi'im Ksuvim. But not the other way around. But not Nevi'im Ksuvim on top of Chumashim. Not Chumashim on top of a Torah. So what does the Braisa say, my friends? You are allowed to put a Sefer Torah on another Sefer Torah. Let's make a correlation. L'choira, the same should be regarding selling to buying equal. Equal is okay. So the Gemara says you can't compare these two cases. Here we're speaking about placing. Says the Gemara, no. Hanacha ka'amrit. Here we're speaking about placing. Shani hanacha, because there is no other option. You have space. Constraints. Where are you going to put it? And I'll prove it to you more. That we take into account practical needs. How can you even roll a Sefer Torah? You're rolling it. You're having one daf on top of the other. One page on top of the other. And if we're going to go with the premise that you may not do equal to equal, so then how would you roll it? Well, you're going to leave the Sefer Torah open, so there's no option. Maybe that's why it's allowed. Ella, kivin de loyef shari. Hachinami, kivin de loyef shari. And you know how this fits so beautifully with this di'evet lechatchila. It's the same thing. Once you sold it already, it's also you have no option. Our question is lechatchila comes along the Taz based on Megila Chav Zayin and speaks about printed svarim. Same kasha, and he is the one that says that you cannot put, let's say, a Mishnayis on top of a printed Chumash, a printed Mishnayis on top of a printed Chumash. He is the one that makes that correlation. Even though in the times of the Tanaim Amoraim, in times of Chazal, he didn't have printed books. Not everyone agrees with him, but we follow those Chomer opinions. And then we have by us how we are machshiv the Tanya, that for us, the Tanya is the Torah Shabachsav of Chasidus. We consider regarding which book should go in the other book on the same madrega of a Chumash. Not one on top of this, not that on top of the other, but that's the top of the levels on all the Torah underneath it. Tashema. In the name of Rashbag. Also another attempted proof. Lo yimkar adam sefer Torah yashon likach by chadash. Befedish. Don't sell a sefer Torah to buy a new one. Alochayra, why not? Because it's not Mylin Bakoidish, and you need Mylin. It's not enough Leimeridin. Says the Gemara, no. There's something else. Mishum Shiuso Kamrinan. If you're going to sell a Sefer Torah, right, a community, because we have to buy a new one, you know what we are afraid? That by the time the new one will be ready, you're not going to buy it. That's a secondary issue. You might not do it. We learned that yesterday about knocking down a synagogue before you built the other one. So ki kamrinan, what is our discussion speaking about? Kegoin, the ksiv, there is already a new one ready. There's a new one in the store. Umanach, and it's waiting. Li'ifruke, it's a beautiful lashon for it to be redeemed, which means for it to be bought. Maybe here there's no afraid of neglect, because when it's right now available, you're not going to neglect. When they're speaking about people that they have good intentions, but if something is delayed, that is where maybe they might not do it. Bottom line is, there's no proof yet. So my Tashema, Dom Rabbi Rab Meir, Ein Moichlin Sefer Torah Ella, Lil Moy Torah Valisa Isham. You are only allowed to Sefer Torah for learning Torah and marrying a wife. Now there's a lot of details to this that we don't have time. Learning Torah means that if you need money to support someone who's learning Torah, that's the meaning of Lomot Torah, and you are allowed to do it. Now, learning Torah and buying a Torah is on the same level. It's on the same level. So Shema Mina, Torah b'Torah shaper dami. Herst, buying a Sefer Torah, giving money to someone who's learning Torah is the same thing, and you are allowed to do it lechatchila. The Gemara says again, lav dafka, you have a proof. Maybe learning is greater than a Sefer Torah. Giving money to a koil or younger man is greater than buying a Sefer Torah. Why? Because when you have the scroll, you have the scroll. You don't have the practice. When you give it to a Yid, both the learning and the Maisa. And also, Ishonami, if you have, that's the greatest mitzvah. Interestingly, we're not quoting Pruravu, we're quoting the Kabbalah, Divrei Kabbalah, that Lo Toyu Bara'ah, God did not create the world for it to be desolate. God wants for the world to be fully populated. Aval maybe Torah loi, maybe loi. So here you have a boya doloi ifshata, and based on that, you have to learn the Rishonim, and now in other words, Now you have the Rabbeinu Ephraim, the Rabbeinu, there's a Rambam, there's a Machloikis, what the Rambam holds. There's a Machloikis, Bishitas Rambam, whether equal is okay or not okay. These are very beautiful topics. Let's go back to Tana Rabbanan. Now that we quoted above about not being allowed to sell a Sefer Torah, only for, now by the way, every chutz has exceptions. We mentioned yesterday, I think you can sell a Sefer Torah to redeem a captive. There's also pikuach nefesh, which is connected to captives. We're not speaking about pikuach nefesh. So let's go. You may not sell a Sefer Torah again for other reasons than the above. This Bryce is not contradicting the above. Even though, no, it's when you're saying that other than to support someone who's learning Torah, other than to get married, other than to that. You can't sell a Sefer Torah. What happens if a person has 40 Sifrei Torah? A person can say, I don't need it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that you don't need it. And Yosser al-Kain Amar Rashbag. Afilu Eiloi ma yoichal. Even if you don't have food. Guys, parentheses, not you don't have what to eat and you're going to die. We're not speaking about pikuach nefesh. You have to understand Chazal. Even if I have so many Sifrei Torah, I don't have what to eat, an American, I don't have what to eat, Sefer Torah, and you sold the Sefer Torah, or something that now was prohibited, but in the times of the Torah, a father had the right, for the right reasons, to, so to say, to sell his daughter as a maidservant. And that's something that was enacted to protect the girl in the times that she needed the protection, because there was starvation in her house or there was wars. But if a man is doing that because he doesn't have what to eat, you have to be very careful when it comes to selling Sifrei Torah. Just an Eitzah Tova that I was told, like over here, Baruch Hashem, we're very grateful to the many families that left their Sifrei Torah with us, that I don't even think it's advantageous for the shul to own a Sefer Torah, unless the community is writing it. We have beautiful families that when they brought a Sefer Torah, they like it and I like it. It's not the shul's. We have the merit, it's a big merit, for us to sort of say borrow it, or for us to house it, for us to be allowed to use it with their reshus. But the family, sometimes a family moves to another place. They want to take their Sefer Torah with them. So the family, it's better for the family. It's not lesser of a mitzvah just because they own it. But there's an achrayus involved. If the shul owns many Sifrei Torah, I know many shuls here, after a couple of generations, a shul can own 40 Sifrei Torah. What do you do with that? And you can't sell it. So, just to know, every yid has a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. I think that's the way to go. Families write Sefer Torah when they can afford it, and the shul should feel lucky, which we are. It's a schus that we have beautiful Sefer Torah here, but the achrayas of ownership and eventually what is going to be done with it, that is on its owners.
What's the Indian to donate a Sefer Torah to a shul that already has 40 Sefer Torah in their condition?
Well, let me say like this, Tzemach. I think there's something magical about writing a Sefer Torah. We learned today that a human being, even a corpse, is like a Sefer Torah. So when we want to live with the Ruchnias Dika reality that my father didn't pass away, and one of the ways that this manifests is if the family can write a Sefer Torah that's here tangibly with us. So you have the children that are observing the Torah, which is keeping the father alive, and you have an actual Sefer Torah. So first of all, Tzemach, so once you have this desire and this mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, Tzemach, so you have to use it. I think it goes from that direction. It's not from the need that the shul needs it. If someone has a father or a zayda, there is a need on the family,
They're rarely used.
It's not true. Well, it depends. So you're right, Tzemach. So it depends. I can just say Chabad Soul is not in that place yet. So we have 8 Sifrei Torah and we have 3 shuls. So they are used. Now, are they used every single week? I love dafka, but they're used. But yet, Samach, you're right. There comes a point. That's what I'm saying. If the shul owns it, so you have 40 Sifrei Torah. If I cared. Okay, means if you sold and you have money, all of the limitations go also to the leftover money. So Amar Rava, we said this in the intro, that is where the leftover money is bound by the same restrictions. What about another case? Gavu, fundraiser. Gavaldik. The shul is fundraising to write a Sefer Torah. And you know what? They raised money. And you know what? They bought a Sefer Torah with the money, but there is leftover money. Now says Rava mutar. You know what mutar means? You can use this money for any need. Any need means it has to be communal, but any need means even mundane. There is no issue of moiridin. There's no moiridin because people, when they gave money, they understood. They want for the money to be used for the stated purpose. And it was used. You have leftover money, any communal need is fine. And again, this is like the trustees with in front of the presence, because everyone knows it from the outset. Now, and again, the chiddush here, guys, mutin means doesn't not only moiridin. Say for Torah, you can buy a chumash, you can buy the kiddush for the Chevron Shabbos. If it's for the community, it's okay, even mundane. Esvei Abaya, how can you say that? It says in a Braisa, but now the Braisa is referring to the case of the Mishnah, that when there was a sale, and the Mishnah, and the rule is that all of the proceeds, the geld, has to go for something that has a higher level of Kadusha. Says the Braisa now adding, that's only when no stipulation was made. Now we have to clarify who, what, when, and where. When there was no stipulation. Aval hisnu, but if they made a stipulation, then afilu de duchsusya. You can even use the money for a duchsusya, which will be explained in a moment. Now, what exactly is the case of the Braisa? Asks Abaya to Rava, Hechidami. Ilema, that we're speaking about a case, Shemachru, that they made a sale, and vehoisidu, and there's leftover money. Our Mishnah wrote that the leftover money from a sale is bound with all of the limitations. Mailan ba'kodesh. So why would a stipulation help? Kihisnu may have. It must be, argues Abaya against Rava, that the Braisa here is speaking about a case where there was a fundraiser, and even by a fundraiser, you have to stipulate lechatchila that if there will be leftover money, then we should be allowed to use the money for any communal need that we seem fit. Time of the hisnu, lo yisnu loy. Rava is a lot more liberal. Rava is saying that if there was a fundraiser, nothing was stipulated. We are fundraising for a Sefer Torah. If you have to buy a Sefer Torah, but the leftover money by default can be used for anything for the community. So the Gemara answers, Rava is not going to be challenged with this Braisa because he'll understand. The Braisa is speaking about selling. By fundraising, Rava stands his ground. By a sale, there's leftover money. Back to what we learned yesterday, that bemet varamamurim. When do we say that what? That if there's leftover money, all of the leftover money also must be used for what? For Mailan Ba'Kodesh. That is only if you don't have together the trustees in front of the people. That means, guys, there was a sale. The sale happened only by the people of the city, or only by the trustees. That's what we're learning continuously. That's the Chachamim, that's the Mishnah. And therefore the money is limited. Fine. And they bought something. Mailan Ba'Kodesh. Now there's leftover money. So Rav is saying that now the trustees should come in front of everyone in the city. They should make a meeting and they should notify people. We made the sale. Or you made the sale. We did everything kosher. Now there's leftover money. Now we want to inform everyone with the consent. The leftover money will be used to buy a bridge. It's okay. Then you can buy afilo l'duchsusya. We'll see again what duchsusya means. Mutter. No, it's when you make a fundraiser, you don't even need the trustees. When you make a fundraiser, all you need to make sure is that you follow through. You bought what you said you're going to buy. If there's leftover money, b'derech memela, says Rava, any communal need is fine you can use. From kodesh, from a sefer Torah to buy a table. Now Abaya heard this Braisa, and he didn't know what the word duchsusya means. So how are you going to find out? Whom do you ask before Google? So you know whom you ask? You don't necessarily ask the greater scholar. This is a very rare word. You ask the simple chassid that is living around the great Rebbe. You know, Shemush Talmidei Chachamim is good for these things. So Abaya didn't go into the greatest lamdan because you're not lamdan. Either you know what the word means or not. It's very rare. Rab Sheshes was like the greatest one. So he asked someone that was a helper around Rab Sheshes. It's someone who was reciting the Braisa reciter in front of Rab Sheshes. Misha Miyalach, did you ever hear from Rab Sheshes what the meaning of duchsusya is? Amalei, yeah, Hachem Rab Sheshes. Duchsusya means parasha damasa, the mailman. That's a great example. You can pay the mailman. A mailman is a great example of someone, his avoida is choil but it's communal because he's not delivering mail for you. Right? Every city has a mailman. Amar Abaya says Abaya, when he heard the answer from Hahumed Rabbanan, guys, this Hahumed Rabbanan was nowhere as great as Abaya. But Abaya made this beautiful statement. Hilkach, Hai Tzurma min Rabbanan. The Shamalei Milsa V'Loyada Perushim. Whenever you can be the greatest scholar. But if you hear something, you hear a word, you don't know what it means, Lishayla Kamei the Shchiach Kamei Rabbanan. Even if you don't have access to the greatest scholar, ask someone, if you have access to him, who was learned in his yeshiva, who was a meshamish in front of the great Rabbanan, because if the people that were around the Gavra Rabbah, they end up knowing more than everyone else. Weiter. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Bishum Rabbi Meir. Next in, I mentioned this in the intro. People, the way tzedakah was collected, it was a lot more forcefully than today. And if this city needed to raise money for a certain ani, almana, whatever the need was, they would go over from family to family, from person to person, and say, you have to give X amount of money. Now, the ardinim that we don't have enough time, but the ardinim regarding that obligation is only on the residents of the city. When do you become a resident of that city? Do you have to live there for 12 months? There's different levels. If you are not even there for 30 days, no one has the right to demand that money from you, and that's the case over here. So the money collector did not have the authority to tell you, a visitor, not only do you not plan to settle there, you're not even there for 30 days. They shouldn't have collected from you, but they're coming and saying, Chaim Yankel, we want for you to pay $100. If someone says that to you, Abaya is going to teach us, and Rabbi Yechanan Meir is going to teach us, interestingly, give the money. Give the money. If someone, because they would demand it, it wasn't an ask, they would determine, you have to give $100. If that was determined, give the money. But if the money was asked from a group is never buttled to the larger community. A group, according to most Rishonim, is 10. They get a refund when they go back home. So everyone gave the $100, so they put together $1,000. Before they go back home, they go over back to this collector and say, the $1,000 is going to tzedakah. You are raising it for the widow. We have a widow in our city. You are raising it for the feeding the poor. We have the poor in our city. If it was less than 10, then if you were demanded to give tzedakah, there's a certain point where you're told to give tzedakah, give the money. And even if the collector should not have asked it from you, but once you gave it, you have to leave it. But if you are a group, you get a refund. Let's read it inside. These are big topics and we're going very quick. Amar Rabbi Yechanan Mishum Rabbi Meir. B'nei Ha'ir. B'nei Ha'ir means a group. According to many, a group is of 10 or more. Sheholchu lilacheres, that they went to another city only visiting. You have to add all these nakudas. And they were not there for 30 days, and they were planning to go back home. Yet, while they were there, they were told that they have to give money. The collector should not have done that, but he did that. So there comes a certain point, this is the message, the ethical message is beautiful, that if someone is asking something of me, even if they really had no right to ask of it, it's hashgacha pratis. I'm being asked to give money for tzedakah. Noisnin, gib. But when they are going back home, then they go back and they get a refund, not for their pockets. So they give the money, they're not poidish minat zibur, they get a refund and they bring it to mefanes and bo aniyei iram. Wow. And don't think it's a das yachid, even though who's greater than Rabbi Meir? But it's a baraisa stam, tanya nami yachi. B'nei ha'ir, again, b'nei means a group. Shaholchu li'ir acheres, and for whatever reason, right or wrong, the chiddush is even wrong. Even upasku aleim tzedakah, and they were asked to give tzedakah, give it. But when they go back home, they bring it with them. That's only because you were a group. So even though you are in this new town, but you still retain some of your identity of being from your original city. But if you are only a yachid, then according to many poskim, any group less than 10, which continue to have the status of a yachid, the same scenario, not only do you give it, but you have to leave it there. Because if a minion of Yidden come into Solam, the way to do it, guys, is to separate them. And I attack this group, you attack that group. then they can never ask for a refund. Now, Rav Huna Gazar Tanis, he once decreed a tainus. Let's go back to Masechta Tainus. There was a drought. We don't know. There was some reason for which he declared a fast. And Olagabe, who came to take part of that fast in his Beis HaMedrash, Rab Chana Bar Chaniloi, and V'chol B'nei Mesai, and all the people in the city. And what happens, guys? Tzedakah was asked. Ramu alai tzedakah. Now, some of these people did not live in the town of Rav Huna. They were in surrounding towns. When you come, Torah, one of the things you do on a fast day is you ask the tzedakah. They were asked to give tzedakah, and they gave tzedakah. And then may say, when they were going to return home, they were a group. This Rab Chana Bar Chaniloi walked in with 10 people or more. There was a group. So Amrulei, they told Rav Huna, the money that we gave you, you got to give back to us because we're going to bring it to our village. Noistnon lon mar, please refund the money. V'nezel, and we are going to return back home. And like we just learned, v'nefarnes ba'aniyei mosin, we're going to give that money to poor people that live in our village, in our town. Rav Huna says, not in our case. Armalahu says Rav Huna to Rab Chana Bar Chiloi and his chevre Tanino. We learned in a brayso that what? But met varam amurim, that there's a refund that's only b'she'ein sham daf chav zayin amid beis chaver ha'ir, that you don't have in the place where you gave the money a great scholar, a great tzaddik. Aval yesham chaver ha'ir. But if the money in the current town where the money was given has this great Talmud Chacham, has this great mashpia Hasidic Yid, then everyone who gives tzedakah understands that it's going to be directed under the guidance of the Chaver Ha'ir, and you can never ask for a refund. He's talking about himself, yes. And furthermore, says Rav Huna, even if you're going to argue that I don't have the status of a Chaver Ha'ir, but in my case, you anyways have to leave the money with me. Why? Because Rav Huna supported not only the poor of his city, Rav Huna was the one in charge of supporting the poor people of their city. So you don't think you're getting a refund so quickly. Let's chaparan a little bit further. So guys, remember what I just mentioned to Tzvika before. This is important when people will learn the Gemara Liba the Hilchasa, that Ravas, what we learned yesterday, what we learned today, and what stays, that there's difference between the 7 Tuvei Ha'ir with the town people. Rav Meir Bechlal does not subscribe to it. Now, what happens if you have a synagogue that belongs to the Rabbim? We're not thinking about the money now. Now we're going to go, the money Mailan Ba'Kodesh. What about the location? The location, that's what Tzvika asked. Can the location be used for anything or not? So the Mishnah says, Ein moichlin ois eshel Rabbim liyachid. Even if, guys listen, the one who's buying a shul, okay, according to Rav Meir, I don't care whether everyone was present, the shul itself also has to be used either for the same level, even according to Rabbeinu Ephraim, it's a shul. You definitely cannot be moided. What happened here is that the shul belonged to the community, and there is a yachid who's very wealthy, who wants to own in his property what's called in English a chapel. He wants to have a place that's exclusively designated for prayer. That means that the buyer will use it for prayer. Elama, it's going to be his private shtibel. Says Rabbi Meir, that's also not okay. Ein moichlin eshel Rabbim liyachid mipnei shemoiridin oisoi mikdushasi devei Rabbi Meir. Again, you have to add that, and according to Rabbi Meir l'shitasoi, even if the Sheva Tuvei Ha'ir and the Kol B'nei Ha'ir are present, it doesn't help. You are always bound by the rules of Mailam HaKodesh V'loi Meridin, not only on the money, but also in the original place. They go hand in hand. So you can never be moided. It means a shul has to remain a shul. But we don't paskin that way. The Chachamim hold that, again, you could. We're gonna continue the sugya, which is so important. But let's go just to this nakuda. The Chachamim hold that a shul used by the Rabbim, now by the Yachid, that's not called moidin. And they gave a proof. Amrullah, if that's called moidin, let me ask you a question. What happens if the shul is being used by a city that has in it, let's say, 1,000 residents, and now it's going to be used by a city that has 100 residents? Are you going to say you're not allowed to do that? It's a shul, is a shul, is a shul. Amrullah, imkain afle mi ir gedol ir katana. That means if there's a shul, many shuls were outside the city. It was in between a big city and a small city. So the same, can the big city sell it to the small city? Are you going to say, and they knew that Rav Meir holds that you are allowed to sell it, we don't look at the numbers. So if you don't look at the numbers, who cares if it's going from a Rabbim to a Yachid? So the Gemara says, Taka, that's a good kasha. Shapir, Kamen, Rav Meir. So the Gemara says, no, Rav Meir, Meir, Gedoyla, Leir, Ketanon. If the shul is being changed, the ownership is changing, but it's shul to shul. Since Me'ikara, Kadisha, Hashtanama Kadisha, there is mamish the same Kadusha. When it was the property of the larger city, so you had 10 minyanim on Shabbos, and now you're going to have only 2 minyanim on Shabbos, but it's still a shul. But merabim liyachid, the moment it's not, you're not going to get a minyan, then like a Kadusha. And the Rabbanon, it's not true. There is a concept of B'roivam Hadras Melech. And since no one is going to hold that we count numbers, so the Chachamim holds in principle, aside of the leniency that the Chachamim have, that there are ways, which is getting everyone involved in the sale, where the Kadusha goes away. Aside of that, you don't even need that. Because if it's, as long as the buyer is going to be using it for his personal chapel, that's not considered any type of step down. It's the same purpose, and it may be sold. We're going to, God willing, continue. And just don't be afraid that we are falling behind. We're not falling behind again because we are coming to the last few daf of Megillah, and being that daf Lamed Beis is only an Amid, so let's not schwitz by the fact that we are an Amid behind. I don't mind staying this way until the end, because like this, the last daf will be a full daf to be continued.